Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So, I'm Parnika. Just give me a minute and I'll share my slide. But before I do that, I'm just very glad that you all could make it. And we have a few ground rules here, obviously. One of them is I would really request everyone to turn off their microphone so that there is, no disturbance and you all can hear me clearly. So, yeah, I would really appreciate that. And if you have any doubts, any questions, or any thoughts at all, please feel free to use the chat box and let me know. And if you would actually have something to offer, or you'd like to talk about something, you're also free to raise your hands and you can. When I'll ask, you can just unmute yourself and contribute. I love to have interactive workshops, even though we are a lot of people here today, so it would be a bit difficult for me to hear all your thoughts, but I would be very happy if you could share any thoughts, any questions, any doubts that you have. Right, I would again like to request everyone to turn off your microphones, please.
एक मिनट नहीं हो रही थी
Okay, all right. So before we start, since this whole workshop, I would really like to request everyone to turn off your microphones, please. Ashish, if you can hear me, please unmute. Please mute the people who have not muted themselves, please.
आइडिया क्या
Okay. All right. All right. So we'll start. Ashish, can you hear me? Can you
दो तीन दिन चलेगा
uh, excuse me, Mr. Suryanand Rao, can you please mute yourself? And Ashish, if you are there, and I think you mute him for me, please? Okay. All right. So sorry for the disturbance, everyone. Right. So we will start with a small mood check. Right. Of course, I cannot force you to turn on your cameras. I can just request you to do so that I don't feel like I'm talking to a screen. But what I would really like to motivate all of you is to use your chat boxes. So let's start with a mood check. Just one word. Tell me, how are you feeling right now? Just one word. What's going on in your mind? I'll start with myself. Okay, right. Thank you, Faria. We have excited. Okay, Angel, we have excited. Great. Okay, now my mood has changed. I was going to say irritated, but now I'm hopeful looking at these responses. Okay, we have grateful. Person has chaotic thoughts. I hope you feel a bit better by the end of this workshop. Happy, tired. Tired is understandable. Yes. Okay, curious, great. The best state to be in. Grateful, happy, amazing, amazing. All right, overwhelmed. All right, Neetu, I hope you feel better by the end of the session. Aryan is sleepy. I hope we do not put you to sleep. So, yeah, thank you, Priya. All right. Thank you, everyone, for responding. Now, let's get into it. So, is my screen visible to you all? Can I see a thumbs up, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, guys. So, as you all know, today's workshop is about mindfulness and specifically how can we use mindfulness in a therapeutic setup. Right, and I am Parnika. I am a clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist. I have been practicing for more than 6 years now, and I also have my own therapy practice known as Empathica Therapy Services, where we provide counseling, psychotherapy, corporate counseling, as well as other workshops and courses. And right now, today, I am speaking to you all because of Sofiana Loka. They have made it possible. I have been, conducting a lot of workshops for Sofiana Loka lately because I feel that their vision and mission aligns so well with mine, and I really love working with them. They genuinely believe in nurturing the spirit of people. They believe in holistic care, and most of their workshops and courses are either targeted towards people who would want to work on themselves, and people who are looking for self healing, or people who are in the profession of healing or psychology or therapy and would like to increase their skills. So I think that's a very great aim to have. So yeah, I am very happy that I am associated with Sophiana Loka. So yeah, now let's get into it. So I would request all of you to just please close your eyes. I want to start this with a small exercise. So please, everyone, close your eyes and have one deep breath. Just invite a single breath in, and then check your feet on the floor or any other point of contact. It could be it could be the sole on your sandal, your shoes. It could be your bed. It could be anything. But check the point of contact. And as you check the point of contact, breathe out. Completely focus on your feet and the surface that it's touching. Hold in that sensation. Focus on that sensation as you breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Now recall a pleasant moment from yesterday or maybe today. And now slow down and visualize that pleasant moment. Visualize that pleasant moment and recall your senses. Use your memories to see what you saw at that point, hear what you heard, feel what you felt, even maybe smell what you smelled at that moment, or touch what you touched in that moment. Let all your senses get active and feel what you felt in that moment, your choice of pleasant moment from yesterday or today. And give it some time. Just hold on to it. And as you hold on to it, take 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, and 3. Now you can slowly open your eyes. That is, if you did participate in this. Can I see a thumbs up to know who all participated in this, please? All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad. And how did you all feel? Can I have one word responses in the chat box to know how are you feeling in the moment? All right. Relaxed, calm, great. Got back to the good time. It was calming, felt present. Yes, felt present. Exactly. Relaxed, pleased. Very good. Peaceful. Great. Great. So, this is pretty much what mindfulness is about. I just demonstrated a very small mindfulness exercise to begin with. All right, so there's a person who says kind of blank. Thank you for this response. And we will actually address this later when we talk about how therapists can actually help clients feel better and what to do if mindfulness is not working for someone in that moment. So thank you for putting that thought in my mind. I'll definitely cover it later. But I'm glad that most of you feel relaxed and calm, and it worked for most of you. So, like I said, this was basic mindfulness demonstration. And now, before we get into other demonstrations and understand how it works, let's understand the theoretical founding of mindfulness, right? So, excuse me. So, I don't know if most of you are aware of this or not, but mindfulness actually comes from Buddhism. And it actually just means to remember or to keep in mind. That was what it essentially meant. But when we actually understand Buddhism, and with most of these religions here, the thing is there was a lot of symbolism. There was never a direct word that held on to a direct meaning. So even though the direct meaning was just to remember or keep in mind, what mindfulness essentially meant was sustained awareness of body, feeling, mind, and phenomena, right? Like what we just did. Sustained awareness of body when I asked you all to feel your feet, then mind when I asked you to go somewhere pleasant, and feelings when I asked you to rely on all your senses and understand those feelings. That is essentially what mindfulness is about. But a very important aspect of mindfulness is also that we use wise discrimination rather than bare attention. So, what we mean by this is attention could be anything at all, right? Like I'm talking to you right now and you're listening to my voice, and maybe there is some background noise here. So, your mind will go to that. You might, pay attention to something else. Or if someone takes your name, someone is loud, your attention would naturally get drawn to them, right? But here it's like you discriminate what you want to pay attention to. You choose something and you pay attention to them. So this is where mindfulness came from. And it was a very, very important concept in Buddhism, which was kind of the whole idea was centered around mindfulness, because the whole belief was that if a person cannot be mindful, or if a person cannot keep things in mind intentionally when they want to, it would be very difficult for them to actually be their best versions or their best selves and to actually develop as human beings. Can you all hear the noise in the background? Is it bothering anyone? Can I please know in the chat box? Okay, it's bothering you. Just give me one minute, please. I'm very, very sorry about this. That's from my end. Yes. Hi. Sorry about that. Okay. One second. Okay. Is my screen visible to everyone? I don't think it is. It is? Okay, great. Okay, it's not, right? Is my screen visible? No? Okay, one second, one second. I don't know what is happening. One second. Okay, Arpita, I'm glad you find this amusing. Okay. Now I assume my screen is visible, right? Okay, perfect. So sorry for this, but life, these things happen. So moving ahead. So this is where mindfulness comes from. Now, how did mindfulness become something that's so mainstream to psychology and psychotherapy today? It basically started when with the foundation of the stress reduction clinic. So there was the stress reduction clinic that was founded in Massachusetts, right, medical center. And so it was a 8 week secular program, and the reason we call it secular was because we understand that mindfulness had actually come from Buddhism. So the thing was, when this clinic was established and when this program was established, there was this whole concern that what how would people from different religious backgrounds react to it? Would they feel this is something related to their religion? So that is exactly why that it was given a term mindfulness, the term which is actually not anywhere there in Buddhism. They just took the concept, gave it an English term, and made it a very westernized concept. Today, when we hear about mindfulness, even the words we use, they sound very westernized, even though it is not a Western concept at all. That was to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with it, and this term and this concept could go global, right? So then the whole idea was to integrate meditation and gentle movement for stress related concerns, right? So when this program happened, people could actually see a lot of improvement in their daily lives, in different aspects of their emotional well-being. And when that happened, then there was a lot of research that people like, okay, what is actually happening in this program? Why are people saying that they're feeling better? What are the results that they are having? In what areas do they feel better? And based on those researches, and then people started adapting mindfulness for different programs, and today here we are. I think, or I believe most therapists and psychologists have definitely heard the word mindfulness. And even if you are nowhere related to the field of therapy, there's a very high chance that you've heard the term mindfulness. It's very much there. It's there on our social medias these days. It's everywhere. So this is where it essentially comes from, right? So now, when we talk about present day mindfulness, what it essentially means is there are four aspects to it. First is paying attention on purpose, like the activity we just did. It was paying attention on purpose. There was something that you intentionally paid attention. You purposely paid attention to. It was not the loud background noise that just happened. Something that no one is trying to pay attention on, but you cannot really help it, right? Second is in the present moment. What do we mean by the present moment is a lot of people can say ki, but the exercise that we did, we actually went back in the past. But the whole idea is that you choose that moment right now, you feel the pure present. And then when you choose a moment, you hold on to that moment and try that your mind doesn't wander here and there, but whatever you choose to focus on, right? Then non-judgmentality. Non-judgmentality is also a very, very important concept of mindfulness. What it means is, if let's say I am feeling irritated in a moment, right? And if I say that I am mindful about my emotion, what it would translate to is that I know that I am feeling irritated. I am observing my emotion of irritation, but I am not judging myself for feeling irritated, or I am not judging my emotion, or I am not asking myself that why am I irritated? Why am I always irritated? What is happening? Or I should not be irritated in this moment. This in itself is a very important skill that people can develop when they practice mindfulness or they start practicing mindfulness. And this skill becomes very, very helpful because a lot of times what happens, let's say I am sad, okay, if I'm feeling really intense sadness, along with whatever negative emotions we feel, a lot of times there is an added guilt for feeling it, right? So if I'm feeling sad, then like, but why am I feeling sad? There's this guilt, or then there is a frustration that why am I always feeling sad? Why can I not be happy? So there is one negative emotion plus an added negative emotion because of feeling the negative emotion. So if people can learn to inculcate this non-judgmentality even while they are observing their emotions, it really helps in breaking this vicious cycle. right? Because you feel a negative emotion, then you feel another negative emotion attached to that emotion. Because of that, you feel the previous negative emotion more, and then you're stuck in the vicious cycle, right? Like I feel sad, then I feel guilty that I'm feeling sad, then I feel even more sad. So this, how we break this vicious cycle is by non-judgmentality. And the fourth point is service of self understanding, right? So when we talk about paying attention or being in the present or being non judgmental towards ourselves, our emotions, or our surroundings, we are also talking that why are we doing all of this? We are doing this to try to understand ourselves better and try to gain inner wisdom. There is a purpose to it, it is not a purposeless exercise. So, this is what mindfulness is about. So, is that clear to everyone? What do we essentially mean by mindfulness? Where does it come from and what does it stand for today? Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Now, when we talk about how do we practice mindfulness, right? So, there are common practices. They include like attending to our breath or our body sensations or sensory experiences with gentle redirection of attention whenever it wanders. So, basically, like the activity we did, we started with senses because I asked you to, we focused on your sense of touch, right? But then I asked you to hold on to a memory, right? We basically made you attentive towards something else, and even then we channeled in the memory of our senses. So sensory experiences often become a very important aspect of mindfulness, right? And there is often attention to breath and body, because again the whole belief comes from balance, and that we believe that the balance can only happen when a body feels balanced, when a body feels in equilibrium. So it's important to ground our body. So it cannot happen just with our mind going somewhere when if our body doesn't feel grounded, with gentle redirection of attention whenever it wanders. So, another thing when we talk about non judgmentality in mindfulness, we also have the acceptance for wandering of attention. We know as human beings, if we are trying to focus on something, it is very natural and normal for the attention to wander. Maybe I'm trying some activity, I'm trying to be mindful in the moment, and suddenly my mind goes off to tomorrow, and oh, tomorrow I have a session in the morning at 8 a.m. Will I be able to wake up for that? It's already late, I've not slept yet. So this is very natural, there is nothing wrong in it. So the idea is that don't try to curb it, but whenever it happens, you note it, okay, this happened, and then you try to redirect your attention that okay, it happened, it wanders, now let's get back to it, without feeling any guilt or any shame around it that oh, why was I not able to focus. Right now, the second aspect is again non-judgmentality, focusing on not labeling anything as good or bad. Your feelings are not good or bad, your senses, whatever you are sensing, is not good or bad, it is what it is, right? Now again, like I said, that programs like mindfulness based stress reduction, and there are these other programs where you basically teach the participants or the clients basic skills, right? And it's repeated over and over again, so that when you repeat certain exercises over and over again, those skills are themselves developed. For example, the activity that I just did with you all, there are multiple such activities, and as we move ahead we will do a few more. So what happens is when you start doing these activities every day, or you make sure that when your client comes to the session, maybe before the session ends or in the beginning, if you're starting with some mindfulness based activity and you also explain them the rationale of it, then slowly those skills get inculcated in their daily lives. So even when they're not doing mindfulness related exercises, they are mindful in whatever they do. That's the whole idea. It's not just about doing certain exercises, but while doing those exercises or through doing these exercises, inculcating these skills, so that it just becomes a part of your life. No matter what you are doing, you are mindful in it. So this is how it is practiced. And now, what are the benefits of mindfulness, right? So these are all benefits that have been found through research. So the first benefit is there have been researches and studies that have found that there is small to moderate improvements in anxiety, depression, and stress. Again, small to moderate is important because we need to understand that even though mindfulness is a very beautiful technique, it is often something that we use along with other interventions. It cannot be the only thing, but still, it is so beautiful that even if we look at it as the only thing, there will still seem to have small to moderate improvements in anxiety, depression, and stress. So, there is some impact, there is some effect. Then there have been studies that have also focused on how it's good for your pain or sleep and overall well-being, right? Again, now it is seen that it reduces risk of relapse, especially in depression and anxiety, right? So it's basically a skill that you use that kind of becomes a part of your coping resources. So we all know as our coping resources increase, the chances of relapse usually go down. So that is what it essentially does. Now overall, it you have people have seen it having having a positive impact on cognition and emotional regulation. Obviously, think of it this way: if you do certain exercises that teaches you to be present, to be aware, but be non-judgmental, to be able to concentrate, and also be able to forgive yourself when your mind wanders, then repeating these exercises would bring some sort of cognitive and emotional regulation, because you are essentially training yourself or training your mind to be regulated and calm. And you all felt calm after this 2 minutes exercise. So imagine this being a part of your life. Then, of course, there is physical health. There have been researchers that have seen that it does help in case of hypertension. So, actual research based, basically, normal research based evidence only suggests its benefits in hypertension. Apart from that, people do believe that there are no cons to it. So even if there is no improvement, but if you're feeling calm and relaxed, then there would be some benefits to your physical health as well. But there is one research based evidence also that it really helps in hypertension. So this is about the benefits. Is everyone clear till now? Anyone has any questions? Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. All right. Now, how do we use it in therapy? Right? Now, in therapy, we use it for these three things or in these three ways. First is orienting to now. This becomes, very important, especially when the client can be very distressed, or they're talking about something. And while talking about some particular experience, you can feel their distress really rising. So you can stop that and help them orient to now before they're comfortable talking about that more. Or maybe after a session where they have spoken about a lot of heavy things, and you can see that there is visible distress, so you can end the session with a mindfulness activity so that they are oriented to the present. Now, the second way in which it's used in therapy is for widening attentional aperture. Right. So, what this essentially means is to help them build the capacity to hold more attention in a positive manner. This, in turn, will help in cognitive and emotional regulation, which will impact positively in every area of their lives, right? And now the third way in which we use it in therapy is through this building, observe, describe, participate without judgment. So I will explain what do we mean by observe, describe, participate without judgment. But this is something that is very useful, and this is a very important technique also in DBT, which stands for dialectical behavior therapy, right? So it is a very important aspect in a therapeutic modality as well. And even if you're not practicing that therapeutic modality, it is still very helpful in just centering the client or grounding the client. Now, how do we do that? Right? So let's start with orienting to now. Okay, this is a very, very common exercise. I'm sure you all have done it or heard about it, but still, let's try to do it once again, all of us together, right? So, I want you to think of one thing, name one thing out loud, one thing that you can see, one sound that you can hear, one touch sensation you can feel, Okay, and then repeat once slower and then return gently whenever the mind wanders. Understood? I want you all to do this. Take a time, I'll also do it, right? Okay, all right. Now hold on to the feeling, and I want you all to use the chat box and just tell me that when you were doing this, what were the feelings that came to your mind? Did you feel anything, or how did it make you feel? And I will share my experience as well. So, the one thing I could see is obviously my computer screen and the slide here, right? One sound that I can hear is the sound of the fan. One touch sensation is a pen that I'm holding in my hand, and one thing I could feel is I could feel some sort of discomfort in my stomach that could maybe be because of the workshop that is going on and like everyone's cameras turned on. I don't know if you're participating or you're listening or what impact it is happening. So, yeah, so there was maybe some sort of worry because of that, which I could feel in my stomach. And after the activity, I actually feel the stomach tension even more. So, but that is okay. I do understand what has happened. So this is the whole idea of it. You do not necessarily always feel good, but you get more aware. And I can see some of your responses. Okay, Neetu again feels blank. That is okay, Neetu. Like I said, it could happen. Then Adrija says it made her feel more attentive to her surroundings. Great. Raisha says taking a moment to pause and feel without talking much stress. Great. All right. Okay. I can feel back pain. Yes. Yes, Arpita. Felt back pain. That does happen because when you actually focus, like before this, I really wasn't feeling any tension in my stomach. But now even I'm suddenly feeling it. But it is good. When we talk about something good, it's not necessarily always calming. Sometimes just being aware to our body's needs is also important, because it is, if we are not aware to what is happening in our body or our mind, how will we attend to it, or how will we make ourselves feel better? So even awareness of unpleasant feelings and sensations are important in the long run. Okay, K Babu says that he feels focused, being more aware of surroundings, says Varshini. All right. Okay, great. Right. So now, when you do this in maybe a therapeutic setup or you help a client do this, few things that you have to keep in mind here is try to keep the language, very concrete and sensory. Now, what I mean by concrete and sensory, you don't necessarily have to do one thing. You can see one thing, you can hear, you can do anything, but it has to be something sensory. It could be, you could elaborate the thing that I started with, the feet thing. You can just elaborate it, that, and do not go into the memory, but just maybe start with, okay, feel your feet against the floor and or against your sandal, your shoes, or the bed, or any points of contact. Now, what I mean by keep the language concrete, we would not end with feel your feet against the floor, because we do not know if you're barefoot, you're wearing a sandal. A lot of times, then the person's mind might wander and it might go like, but I don't feel the floor. So we have to provide utmost clarity to the person. So say, okay, we give all the options. So the mind clearly goes to the option that is relevant for them. It has to be sensory, that, okay, you feel the floor or you feel your shoes, and then okay, then feel your feet, then you can maybe come up or feel your hands, see what are you touching, what is your back touching. So you can go to different parts of their bodies and ask them to feel what they're feeling there or what they're touching. Or you could maybe just focus on one thing. Maybe you can just focus on the sounds, and instead of going all over, you can just ask them to close their eyes and hear all the sounds first, and then focus on one sound and hear it louder than another sound and hear that louder. So you can change, you can keep on changing it as long as you get the basic idea, which is orienting them to the present, which happens when you help them focus on their sensory experiences, right? And of course, like I said, it's very important to keep the language concrete, to keep the language simple, and it could be anything, external sights or touch, right? Okay. And it's again a very important aspect is at times in orienting to now it could also be something like I said, that touch sensation you can feel, uh, and one touch sensation you can feel. So now when you talk about the touch sensation, like someone said they felt pain in their back, I told you I felt something in my stomach. So now we have moved from external to something very internal. It's something in our body, something that might cause discomfort. So when you're doing it one on one and maybe it's a bit longer and you understand there is a discomfort, so you can totally change it. The moment you feel there's discomfort, you understand, you note that discomfort, and then you move to something external again. Or like if I say that, okay, I feel tension in my stomach, then the therapist or the mindfulness practitioner at that point can say, okay, all right, tell your body that you have noted that tension. Now, why don't you focus on your arms? Where are your arms resting and what you feel? So you go back to external to make sure that when the exercise is over, it is over with them feeling calm. The problem is noted, you come back to it later, but you focus on something that makes them feel calm instead of what, increases any sort of distress. So this is orienting to now. Is this clear to everyone? Is this okay? All right, thank you. Oh, now widening attention, right? So there are a lot of ways of widening attention. We will just do one small activity here, and then I will tell you what other different kinds of activities you can use with your clients if you want to use this. Okay. Now, you'll do this activity for around 40 seconds. I want you all to label body sensations with simple words. For 40 seconds, just start with your feet. That's easier. And use any word in your mind or out loud. What do you feel in your feet? Go upwards. What do you feel in your ankles? Go upwards. What do you feel in your legs? Go upwards. What do you feel in your knees? Go upwards. What do you feel in your thighs? Go upwards. What do you feel in your stomach? Go upwards. What do you feel in your chest area? What do you feel in your back area? What do you feel in your fingers? What do you feel in your arms? What do you feel in your shoulders? What do you feel in your neck? What do you feel in your face? Feel your facial muscles. How do you feel? Your jaw, is it relaxed? Is it tensed? Just name it. How do you feel overall in your body? Can you smell anything? Taste anything? What do you smell? What do you taste? Now take one slow breath, and as you take that breath, tell yourself and tell your body, I see you. I understand what you're feeling, what you are going through, and it's okay. It's okay to feel whatever you are feeling. All right. May I know who all participated in this exercise? Okay, great. And could you please use the chat box to tell me how are you feeling? Was it effective, not effective, whatever thoughts came up in your mind? Okay. Thank you, Meega. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And yeah, talking about names, I am very sorry for my name. My name is not Navendu. My name is Parnika. After I joined, I realized that I joined with the wrong ID. So yeah. Okay. Effective, very effective, calm, stressed, tensed. Okay. Felt like I'm in pain. Okay. All right. Calm. Felt calm. Stiffness has reduced a bit. Okay, great. All times I felt really tired and now I feel better. Okay, amazing, Varshini. So happy to hear this. Aware. All right. Calm. Relaxed. Okay, great. Great to know that. And yes, I do understand that there are people who might have felt a little anxious and people who felt the pain. And that also happens. Like I said, that also happens. And that is why it is very important that when you work one on one with the person, you ask them how did they feel and try to adjust the activity based on that, and also try to understand that what needs their immediate attention. If there is pain in their body, then try to first focus on that pain. Or if they are feeling some sort of anxiety, try to maybe stop the activity and talk about that anxiety. So it is also very important that it cannot, or what I feel, this is my personal experience. So a lot of programs around mindfulness happen in group settings, right? But my personal experience is that it is not as impactful than in one-to-one settings, and it's the most impactful when you integrate it with other therapeutic modalities, because it actually gives you the chance to understand what the client is feeling, thinking, and take it from there. Because it's not one size fits all, right? It totally depends on the person, and you cannot really teach or inculcate certain skills in an individual if you are not treating them as an individual. They, every person is different, they are having different sensations, different feelings. You cannot treat an entire group in the same manner. I know right now I'm doing that, but that is for the purpose of demonstration. But when it comes to practice, I strongly suggest that mindfulness works best in one-on-one sessions instead of group sessions. And that doesn't mean that you cannot inculcate it in group sessions. You definitely can, but any deeper work would happen better in one-on-one sessions. Okay, all right. Okay, good to know, Samir, that you had, not good to know that you had mild pain in your head, but good to know that after this practice you felt that it reduced your pain. Okay, just me says finally in my senses. Okay, I'm so glad to know. All right. So now we'll talk about the observe, describe, participate. Okay, now before that, the tip again, the tips are mostly same for all, right? Again, keep the cue simple, but one important aspect here is that expand the field gradually. Now, did you all notice I started with your feet here, right? It's a smaller area of your body, and then slowly feet, then legs, and the stomach area is like it's stomach area, it's not a pinpoint in your body. Then back area is again not a pinpoint, and then in the end it was your entire body. But if I just ask you to feel from your entire body, or see that, oh, what do you feel in your entire body, then a lot of people might not be able to do it, and if they do it, they might not be able to do it that successfully. So it's important to start with something small, and then gradually expand the field. And another aspect is that always try to end this with your breath, with some sort of breath work. Because when you're sensing different things in your body or around you, what can happen is it can be a bit overwhelming. So if you end with some sort of breath work, even if it's like a 3-second breath work, it provides some sort of grounding that is very necessary. So now for widening attention, you don't necessarily have to do this. You can do this activity. Another very common activity that you can do for widening attention is this is more internal because it focuses on your body. There is you can also use external activities. Like one of the external activities could be that, okay, hear the sounds in your close distance. Name those sounds. Then try to hear the sounds that are a bit further, then a bit further. And you do the same with sight, right? You can only do this with sounds and sight, but to gradually expand the field. This also really works. But this usually, the reason I did not do it right now is because, again, I feel this and certain things work best one on one, not in a group. But one on one, if you try this, it really works because they are continuously responding to you. And you change your tone and you change your instructions based on their responses instead of following a script. Again, this is also one very important aspect I've seen, especially when it comes to different kinds of meditation or mindfulness activities or these exercises. There is a lot of emphasis on scripts, and I've felt a lot of practitioners and therapists try to follow certain scripts. What I feel is it's best to just keep the script as maybe just for reference and follow the client, make it client centered, go with the client, what do they feel, how do they respond, and keep on changing that. And you will only be able to do that successfully if you understand the theoretical foundation of what you're doing, why you are doing it, and you're in tune with your client. So it's very important for any such practice for you to be aware, you to be present, and you to be in tune with your client's feelings and emotions instead of trying to follow a script. So this was just a side tip that I added that I strongly believe in, and I've learned this from my experience. So yeah. Okay, so now let's move to the third activity, which is the observe, describe, participate activity. Right, so here, what I want, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll talk about it in a moment. First, let's just get into it. So I want you all to grab any one thing that is in your reach. For example, I have, this pen right now in my hand. So I am holding this pen. So anything, you have a pen, you have a book, there is a pillow around you, anything, I want everyone to grab one thing that they can hold, right? And when you hold it, take your time to just observe it, completely observe it, touch it, feel it. How does it feel against your fingers? See it, see the entire object. That what do you see? What is there? What color it is, or what feelings does that object bring in your mind? Just completely observe it from all your senses. If that object has any kind of smell, how does it feel, how does it look? So yes, take a minute to just do this. Okay, now I want you all to first speak out loud what happened when you observed the object. How would you describe the object? How did it feel? uh, was there any smells? Were there any feelings in your body? What did you notice about the object? I would strongly encourage you to just speak it out loud to yourself. Okay, all right. Also remember, it is describing without judging the object. The object is what it is, it's not good or bad. And now I want you all to use your chat boxes and just Let me know what was the object and what was one specific unique thing that you noticed about that object that maybe you did not notice a few minutes earlier. Like, I'll tell you mine. Like, I had this pen in my hand and I noticed that it's a green pen. So I noticed that there is a green stain here, which is the pen's ink. This stain I really did not notice earlier. So that is one thing that I noticed. And also, this I knew, but the thingy of the pen, the cap part, the part that people use to maybe put it to their shirt, I'm forgetting what it's called. So that's broken, which I knew. But when I touched it, since it's broken, there is the surface is not very smooth. So yeah, these are the two things that I noticed. All right. Shifa says her pen has a weird smell. Okay. All right. What about others? Okay. Okay, Arpita, I see your question. I will address it once we're done with this activity. Okay, headphones. There is this circle on backside which I didn't notice before. Okay, I noticed my pen's texture and shape. Okay, I took a book. While seeing it, I feel bright. I just now saw the fonts are in blue color. Okay, all right. What about others? Would others also like to share? Okay. It was my favorite Vicks vapor rub. Okay. I've opened it and smelled and happened to recollect an old advertisement about it. Okay, great. What about others? Okay, all right. Jasmeet says that she held her cell phone and observed it and she found a crack on the screen. I had earplugs at one end, soft at one end and hard at another. Yes, Pradnya, very fair observation. Yeah. I noticed inside the cap of pen has two small semicircles in it. I felt like squeezing it out. Yes, I do get that feeling, Neetu. All right. Okay. Thank you everyone for this. Now, this what we did right now was okay. Okay, Arpita, I felt like it is my friend and it's a living thing and I can feel my emotions. Great. Okay, Kevapu says this exercise slowed me down. Okay, in a good way or in a bad way, I would just like to know. Again, like I said, that when we do individual exercises, we make sure to design it based on the individual's response, which is not possible in a group exercise. But I would still like to know in a good way or bad way or what's going on right now with you. Okay, Samir says I took mobile in hand. I could feel the weight, could feel mild cover rubber smell, and I got a thought how people are addicted to this thing. Okay, fair enough. Yes, K Babu, could you please tell me that how did this exercise slow you down? Good way. Okay, all right, good to know. Thank you. Okay, so this was the observe and describe part. Now, what do we mean by participate? Is basically participate in one activity completely, right? So, this is also something that's a bit difficult to do virtually, but it's something that you can inculcate in your everyday lives and teach your clients to inculcate in their everyday lives. They choose one activity, right? It could be anything. It could be something like brushing your teeth in the morning. So when you go to brush your teeth in the morning, if you use the whole observe, describe, participate thing, so what you do is when you go to brush your teeth, you hold on to your brush and first you observe the brush or the toothpaste or anything in your washroom. Right? You completely observe it. Then you describe it to yourself and then you participate is just brushing your teeth. But when you brush your teeth instead of thinking about anything else. So, what we usually do, we all do that. When we do these mundane activities, our thoughts are somewhere else. We are doing them on autopilot. I don't remember, even if I talk about myself, I don't remember the last time when I brushed my teeth and I actually focus on brushing my teeth. We just do these things on autopilot and we're thinking about our day or what will we do next or things that we have on our agenda. But instead of that, if you just focus on brushing your teeth, that you just focus on how the toothbrush feels or how the toothpaste tastes, and just focus on the activity. That is what we mean by participate. Participate fully in the activity by completely being present and by completely being in the moment. So this is something that can be used in your daily life. Also, for example, if you're drinking water, you go to drink water, you decide, okay, I'm going to do this activity today. Or you make up your mind that once a day I will do it with something. So you go, you first pick up the bottle, you totally observe it, describe it, and then you drink the water. And when you drink the water, you try not to think about anything. If your mind wanders, it's okay. You note it and you try to come back to just drinking the water. And this is something, just think about it, right? If you start doing these small activities and exercises, slowly this will increase your attention and non-judgment so much that will start naturally happening in everything, which would help especially with anxiety, right? So what you can do in a clinical setting is choose something that is there in the setting, to make sure it could be water itself, it could be a bottle and a glass, and you make the client do the observe, describe, participate thing every session with something other. And then after a few times ask them to choose mundane activities from their life and try to do that once in a day. Choose any mundane activity that they do every day and tell themselves that when they do that particular activity, they'll do it mindfully. Then slowly ask them to increase that one activity to two activities. That can you choose two activities? Then can you choose three activities? And then maybe ask them that, do you have you picked up more activities even without realizing it? Are you doing more things mindfully these days? And if they are not, then ask them that what are the problems or the challenges they feel. So this is how the whole observe, describe, participate aspect happens, which is one of my favorite. And you'll also realize if you actually practice this in your life, you will see results. So is everyone clear here? Any thoughts, doubts, questions, anything at all? Okay. All right. So shall we move on to the next slide? I'm assuming there are no doubts here. Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Now, when we talk about the therapist stance, right? So, I've already, okay. What if I observed and feel the things, but I don't add any meaning to it? Okay, all right. So, Neetu, that is great because the whole thing is this is supposed to be non-judgmental. So it's okay if you're not adding meaning to it. You just make a mental note of the fact that you're not adding meaning to it, and it's absolutely fine. It is a practice to be more in the moment, and some people are more internal and some people are more external. So for internal people, the meaning adding happens very naturally. For the external people, it doesn't. And there is no right or wrong way to do it. Just do it your way. And K Babu says, does it work with an ADHD person? Unfortunately, no, not really, not always. And especially if someone has severe ADHD and you start with this, with before doing other work, or maybe in some cases certain medications might be needed, and you just start with this, it would probably not work. And I think this is true for all kinds of therapeutic modalities and all kinds of therapeutic tools. This is something that I always say, that no, I don't think even in my practice I have ever come across any one therapeutic modality or any one therapeutic tool that works for everyone. We are individuals. There will always be some person that it won't work for. And that also is your skill and acceptance as a therapist to understand when to try it with someone, when not to try it with someone. And when you are trying it with someone, checking up on them and asking, is it working on them? And observing, is it working on them? And if it's not trying to push it, but choose something else. It's true for any therapeutic tool. Yes, Arpita, that does happen. When I say internal, what I mean, a lot of people who are more internal people are usually more in tune with their feelings, and external people are more in tune with their external stimulus. So, if you're more in tune with your feelings, then any stimulus is more associated with the internal thought and feeling. If you're a more external person, it's just more about your senses and not the emotions associated with it. It's not black or white. I just used it as an example, but yeah. Okay, so coming to the therapist stance, right? So, number one, make it very brief. It's very important. Like right now, I'm not making it brief at all. I know, but that's because I'm trying to talk about a new topic and share things. But when you're actually doing mindfulness practice, it is important that you make it very brief with your client. You do not use too many words or too many sentences to confuse them. It needs to be clear, and their consent is very important. What I mean by consent here is, before you throw them into an activity, ask them that I'm planning to do an activity with you. Are you okay with it? At any point, if you feel uncomfortable, please opt out. Let me know you're not comfortable, and we'll stop it right then. It's very important to give your client this option, right? Then queue options always, that we can either do this or this. You do even while you are maybe going through an activity, and you can always say things like, either pay attention on your visual senses or your hearing senses. You give that option right there, so that whatever feels comfortable and more natural to them, they choose it immediately, right? Then again, obviously track responsiveness and stop if signs of overwhelm appear. Obviously, you don't want to overwhelm the client, so you also have to be very observant here. You also have to be in tune with the client and see how are they responding, even if they are not verbally saying anything. Are there any physical signs of distress? Do you feel them twitch or maybe change in their expression? So you also need to be very responsive to that. And again, I think tone is very important. So even when I think you all must have noticed that when I'm talking, this is my normal talking voice, but the moment I go into the activity, my tone changes, because your tone also has to be calming. So I have to channel whatever tone comes naturally to you that feels calming to you. Because right now, the way, because you have to be authentic also in this practice, because if you are not authentic, it's difficult for the client also to get behind it. So right now, this is how I'm talking, this is my talking voice, but I don't find my talking voice calming. I just talk like this. So but the voice that I use, I don't know if everyone finds it calming or not, but when I hear myself speak like that, that is a side of me or a tone of me that I myself find calming. So it has, become, it's become so natural, it has become such an habit to me. If I'm doing any kind of meditative exercise, any kind, my tone just shifts. So it's very important to find that tone, not copy someone else's tone, but find what tone works for you, what tone is calming to you, and go with that tone, because it makes a lot of difference. Now, when to use and when to pause. So I think we got into it with the question that does it work for people with ADHD. So that is very important to understand when to use, when to pause. That is where your judgment as a therapist comes. When it's also, like I said, it's also important to observe physical signs of distress, and of course vocal signs of distress. If someone tells you it's not working, or if they're not liking it, or maybe like a lot of people said that they felt, I think 2-3 people said that it made them feel of some pain. Some people said that there was some anxiety. If you are having such responses, then that is the time to stop, but or pause. Now, is it necessary that just because someone is feeling a bit anxious, you pause and you don't do it? It might still really work for them. That is when you pause, pivot, and you return. So basically, what you do is you pause the activity, you address what else is happening. If the discomfort was because of anxiety, you address the anxiety. Then, when they feel a bit calm, then you come back to it. Or if it's pain, you address the pain, you address the problem, and then you try to return. If there is still discomfort, then you stop. So this is basically, when what I mean by the therapist stance is, if you are including or inculcating mindfulness in your therapy practice, or you're using mindfulness in any way with anyone else, it is very important to make sure that these are the things that is in your mind. You have to be very aware of your tone, your body language, the words you use, how much you're speaking or how little you are speaking. Is this clear to everyone? Any doubts, any thoughts on this? Does everyone agree here? Or if you have any conflicting thoughts or doubts, I would love to hear them. Okay, so Pradnya says that what is the intention of such exercises? Is it to divert attention of a patient from stress in minds? No, Pradnya. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So, it is the intention is not to divert the attention of a patient from stress in their minds. It is more of grounding. So, here I spoke about the intentions, right? So one is orienting to now. So when we say orienting to now, it could be basically helping them ground. So if a person feels really discomfort in that moment, you help him feel more grounded. In a sense, you can say that it's to divert their attention. If they're feeling very stressed, you're helping them to divert their attention and feel calm and grounded in that moment. That is one intention. Other intention would be widening attentional uh, uh, sorry, at times I forget to pronounce words that I have pronounced 5 minutes ago, right? So anyway, when you widen your attention, what really happens is uh, it is not just about diverting your mind. Then you are basically teaching and training your body to respond better to stimulus. So here it also helps in cognition and emotional regulation. The more you start regulating your mind, your body, your senses, that will help you regulate your emotions and regulation. So it's not simply about orienting to now, which is one aspect of it, but it is also teaching the clients a skill that becomes a very important coping resource. If they learn it through these exercises and you teach them to practice them, it increases their emotional responses, and it becomes a part of their coping responses in life, in a way that a lot of times they might not even do it as an exercise. That is the whole idea of mindfulness, to teach the client mindfulness to an extent that they are not always doing it as an exercise, but they are just in, inculcated it in their lives. They are just doing it while they're eating or doing something else, and that in itself is helping them regulate their emotions better, right? So this is the main intention, not just distracting, but yes, distracting and grounding and emotional regulation. Did I answer your question, Pradnya? And also with the whole observe, describe, participate thing, we are building non-judgment. And when we build a non-judgmental attitude, like I said, it helps in breaking that vicious cycle, that if a person's feeling sad and the person's feeling guilty about feeling sad, then they'll end up feeling even more sad. So when we teach a person to develop a non-judgmental attitude even towards their own thoughts and own emotions, it helps break a lot of vicious cycles. It helps improve symptoms of depression and anxiety. So this is the main intention of inculcating mindfulness in therapy. Did I answer your question, Pradnya? Okay. All right. Anyone else has any doubts or any questions? Okay. All right. So now trauma sensitive practice. Again, I think someone did ask some question, it's which is related to what I want to talk about here. Just let me scroll up. Okay, I'm so sorry, I lost it somewhere in the chat, but I think someone did speak about not being able to relax, or what happens if your mind is always blank or you're not able to relax. So it is also important to understand, a lot of times people might be holding on to some trauma, or maybe they are very maybe the level of anxiety is very high, or maybe they are overthinkers and it's very difficult for them. So it is important to offer them options. And number one, you can offer eyes open option. Not everyone's comfortable with closing their eyes. Okay, yes, Arpita, like people with chronic yes, Arpita, this was the question I was talking about. Thank you so much for typing it out again. People with chronic pain, illness, or fatigue syndrome who can never be relaxed 100%. So it is for you to, number one, understand, because again what happens is, a lot of times when you're trying an activity and the person is not able to relax completely, there kind of becomes some sort of shame around this, that am I doing this activity wrong? Why am I not able to relax 100%? So it's important to debrief them and tell them in the end that it is okay if you're not able to relax. Not everyone's okay to relax, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how much were you able to relax and how much did you relax earlier? So if there is any improvement, it is fine. You should still go ahead with it. If there is no improvement, that is for you to realize that this is not the right method for them. It becomes a clinical judgment. But any improvement, go ahead with them. But also make sure that you offer them a lot of options, like offer them eyes open options, offer them pauses, right? Here we come back to the pause, pivot, return. Offer them pauses. And also, if there is a lot of anxiety, then start with external focus first. Like the first activity that I did not ask you to just think of one emotion. First, I asked you to feel your feet. So that is focusing on the external focus first. Then always there are consent reminders that if you're feeling uncomfortable at any time or any point, you can leave or you can just raise your hand and let me know. This is something that I do with all sorts of meditative practices, right? So one thing that I do is I tell my clients when I start any meditative practice that in between, if there are a lot of thoughts going on in your mind, you feel a lot of distress or you're unable to concentrate, or there is any unpleasant emotion, you just raise your hand or you can just come up with any sign, so that I as a therapist know. Then I will tell the client that even after, I will try to make sure that make you feel better, but if it when you feel better, make sure that you put your hand down. So what happens is when the client does raise their hand, you try to change the wording, you try to make it more external than internal, based on what they prefer, based on what they like. You try to focus on those things, and still after I think 30, 40, 50 seconds or maximum 1 minute, if they have not put their hand down, so you go to breathing and you end the exercise mid session, but with breathing, because grounding is important. Never end any meditative exercise, whether it's about mindfulness or it is driven from some other modality. It should always end in some sort of breath, right? So this is basically important. And this is essentially what we mean by trauma sensitive practice, that we need to be sensitive to the clients, we need to be sensitive to maybe their traumas, their anxieties, and if they are feeling any discomfort. And in order to be this sensitive, it's always important to remind yourself that no modality works for everyone. Constantly be aware and keep on checking if it's working with your client. When should you pause or when should you stop completely? So is this clear with everyone? Is or there any thoughts or any doubts? Or Arpita, did I answer your question? Okay. If there's no physical pain, but there's some bad past experience which scares them, yes, same answer, same thing. Still, you have to make this, and if that is there, you have to do the stop, pivot, return technique. You have to understand and talk about this, resolve this before you get into this. And if they are still not comfortable, it is okay. You don't have to do it at all. The answer still remains the same. It's Is it effective for PTSD? So yes, there are certain researches, Neetu, that shows that mindfulness is really, effective for PTSD and other forms of anxiety disorders. But the thing is, again, every individual is different. Consent is important, especially with PTSD. Also, it's very important to make sure that you are very sensitive to them. But yeah, that doesn't mean that it's not effective. As long as you move at their pace and don't try them to move at your pace. Any other questions? Okay, all right. So, can I have a thumbs up if it's okay if I move ahead? Okay, so Arpita says basically any kind of trauma, if it's mental or physical, if the discomforts gets triggered, we have to stop it. Yes, Arpita, exactly. Is there any other question, thought, doubt, anything else? Can I use it on a person having a panic attack? Yes. Yes, definitely. But it needs to be very, very external and not internal if a person is having a panic attack. It needs to be orienting to the present, but very external. No focus on the current feelings or thoughts, because that will get more overwhelming. Any other thoughts or doubts? Okay, can we move ahead? Can I see a thumbs up? Okay, okay, thank you. All right. Okay, now how do we use mindfulness in common clinical moments? Opening a session. Obviously, as you start a session, opening a session, use a mindfulness exercise or activity can be very helpful to help the client be calm or relaxed. Then transitioning after an intense content, basically, if the client, like I also mentioned earlier, that if they talk about a very heavy experience, right, and it brings up a lot of difficult emotions in their minds, so to transition from one topic to another or in between a heavy topic, mindfulness activities and exercises really help. De-escalating, of course, if there is a bodily arousal or if you can feel certain panic situations like a person just asked, so in de-escalation also mindfulness activities and exercises really work. Now preparing for exposure, so again, if there in cases of certain kinds of phobia, like kinds of anxieties, right? If you're doing exposure therapy, so before you prepare a client for exposure, if they are going to be exposed to something that they are scared of or something that makes them anxious, so these mindfulness practices are really handy to help them ground before they are ready for the exposure. And then closing. Again, when you end a session, and if you close with the mindfulness activity, it also feels that okay, whatever you've spoken about, even if it's really heavy, but you close with the mindfulness practice, the client might feel more calmer and more grounded as they walk out of the clinic or as they click the end icon. But yeah, okay. How do we deal with the fear of having another panic attack while practicing mindfulness? Okay, that is a very fair question. So, again, first, the point is in cases of panic attacks to focus on very external, a very external stimulation. As the focus is more and more on external stimulation, what happens is naturally the internal thoughts keep on going down because the mind has a limited capacity. So more you focus on external stimulation, less you will have even the space to think about the fears that you are going through. That is why completely it is very, very important when you are doing any mindfulness exercise with a person having a panic attack to be super cautious and careful of the words that you use. There should be no words that makes them go internal at all. Your words has to stress on all external stimulations, and that in itself would help them forget about that fear in that moment. Then after they have calmed down, then you can discuss the fears and maybe use different modalities to help them deal with it. Did I answer your question, Sunita? Oh, yes, yes, Faria, definitely we can use it with ourselves. In fact, I think it is a very, very, very good way for also, even if you're having a panic attack or if you are a practitioner, you also have your moments. We are all humans. So, yes, 100% you can use it on yourself. Okay, all right. So, this is clear. Okay, how do we use mindfulness in common clinical moments? How do we use it in therapeutic moments? That's clear. When to use it and how to use it. Okay, perfect. So now, when we talk about common clinical moments, mindfulness is also used in some therapeutic modalities. In fact, it is a very, very essential part of three therapeutic modalities, even though it is used in other therapeutic modalities also. Like these days, there is mindfulness based CBT as well, where it's actually CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, but you also inculcate mindfulness. And these days, in most therapeutic modalities, therapists are inculcating mindfulness as well. But three therapeutic modalities are kind of based around mindfulness. One is obviously mindfulness based stress reduction. That is how mindfulness came into mainstream, right? Another is ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. So here, mindfulness is used for the acceptance part. So in brief, I'll just tell you what we mean by acceptance commitment therapy. So it's about accepting your current emotions, your feelings, your thoughts. Instead of trying to actively change it, you accept it, then you ask yourself, what do you value more in your life? And you commit yourselves to making changes in your life towards the things you personally value, not what the society tells you to value or what people tell you to value, but what you value. So you make positive changes while accepting the present. So you do not start with the commitment to change unless you accept the present. That is the main essence of it. And here, mindfulness becomes a very important aspect in accepting the present. It helps you accept your present thoughts, present feelings, present emotions. Right? So, is this clear how mindfulness is related to ACT? In fact, not related, a very important component of ACT. Okay. All right. Thanks for the thumbs up. Now we come to DBT, right? Now, again, mindfulness is again a very, very important component of DBT. It is one of the main components of DBT, right? So, basically, DBT helps people to improve their emotional regulation, right? To reduce their distress and develop coping mechanisms and with their interpersonal functionings, right? So there are these 3 4 areas that DBT helps people with. Here, mindfulness becomes a very important aspect to help people improve their distress tolerance. Right? The whole idea is that there are certain people who have very low distress tolerance. That means that if anything happens to them they're not mentally prepared for, or something that they did not want, anything that's a bit distressful, they end up having a very disproportionate emotional response to that. So here, teaching mindfulness helps them with their distress tolerance. And it's one of those modalities, especially when you start with DBT. If you're using DBT modality with a client, you will dedicate a few sessions specifically to mindfulness in that client, and you do it in a bit different way. You basically use the whole observe, describe, participate thing, but it's even more elaborate in DBT, and that teaches them to improve their emotional regulations, right? And are you all familiar with the fact that DBT is primarily used for people with borderline personality disorder? It was developed for people with to help people with borderline personality disorders, but today research has found that it's very efficient for people with borderline personality disorders, but it's also very, very efficient for anyone with low distress tolerance. Or there are some people, and even when you are diagnosing, this is something that I've also noticed a lot, that a lot of times there are people who don't really have any formal diagnosis, but they just have low distress tolerance. And there are people who would tell you also that I don't know why I get so emotional, I don't know why I cannot really control my emotions, but there is no other clinical diagnosis, but there is some low distress tolerance. So here also DBT becomes very, very important and very, very handy. And yes, mindfulness is a very important aspect of it. So now, is this clear how mindfulness is used in clinical setups? Okay. All right. Perfect. So I will also, take out this moment before we end today's workshop to say that we actually recently launched our DBT practitioner course, which is happening from the 10th of November. All right. So this is going to be an online practitioner course taught by me, which is basically on DBT. It's going to be a 1 month course, which is going to have online classes, projects, a lot of consultation groups. It's going to help you develop actually real skills. It's not just going to be workshopy-ish. You actually have to participate. There'll be smaller number of participants. It's like a proper course that's going to help you actually learn DBT practically, and it will be good for any person who is interested in exploring different modalities. So yes, this is about it. And if you have, it's like I said, starting from 10th of November, the classes are going to be in the evening. Like it's mentioned, the classes are going to be on weekdays from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. We'll have classes thrice a week. If there are any other questions, please contact Ashish from Sophiana Loka. You can directly reach out to Sophiana Loka, or you can reach out to the number that's given on the screen, and he'll give you the details. And if you're interested in enrolling, I will see you soon, because I'm going to be the practitioner there. So if you found anything valuable in today's workshop, or if you find my style of conversing or teaching comfortable, or something that you think you can gain something out of, because I also feel not everyone's teaching style or interacting style matches with every person who's willing to learn a skill. So if you feel any kind of match and you're interested in DBT, please reach out to Ashish, and he'll answer your doubts and help you enroll. So yeah, that was about today's workshop. Thank you so much for participating in today's workshop. And I am again a very big believer of answering questions as they come. And that is what I did today. But still, in the end, if you all have any other questions, please, feel free to ask me any questions that you might have about today before we end today's workshop. Again, thank you so much for participating. Okay. All right. I'm glad. I'm glad. Okay. Thank you. And if there are no questions, I would just have a small request for whoever it is convenient. If you could just, turn on your camera so that we can, take a picture to remember this session, that would be great. Okay, so about the certification, also Ashish would be the right person to answer that. I am the face, I am the person who teaches, I am the person who instructs, but for anything technical related, based on the certificate, study materials, whatever, Ashish is your person. So reach out to him for that. Yeah, can you please turn on your cameras? No one, it seems like no one's listening to my request. Okay, thank you, Arpita. Okay. All right. Okay, I think that's all we're going to get. So yeah. Okay, thank you, Shristi. Okay, great. Thank you so much for attending today's workshop. And yeah, again, happy Diwali to you all. Thank you, Arpita. Happy Diwali, everyone. And hope to see some of you soon, maybe for the course or maybe for any other workshop. So yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Great. Okay, happy Diwali, everyone. Thank you and have a good night.